warm summer breeze caused the chestnut and the maple trees to gently sway back and forth in the dense forest. Inside the rustic cabin, all 9 of the Reed children were gathered around the table, finishing up the morning breakfast that their mother Sally had cooked on the old wooden stove. "Ma, can I stay home from church today?" the oldest boy, Conrad, asked. "Of course not. What in the devil has gotten into you? It's Sunday, and I aim to see each of my young'uns in the Lord's house," the mother replied. The boy's father, John, continued chewing on his bacon and listened intently to the conversation from the other end of the table. "I know, Ma, but please, you know I don't ever miss church. But I'm really itching to try out that new bow and arrow that Pa made me last week. And we've been working in the fields from sunup to sundown every day, and I ain't even had a chance to target practice with it. Can I please just stay home just this once, Ma?" The boy's father spoke. "The boy's right. I was studying the clouds over the last few days, and there's falling weather coming tomorrow, and I reckon it's going to rain pert near every day for the next few days. Let the boy get some practice with the bow. Maybe you might even be able to catch a squirrel for supper tonight." "No, sir, Pa. I've got my mind set on taking it down to the creek and doing me some bow fishing," the boy replied. Sally, who was finishing up the dishes, wiped her hands on her apron. "Well, all right, I reckon. But if you're staying home, you'll have to tend to your younger brother and your sisters, too. I suppose it might be nice for your Pa and I to have a little time to ourselves for a change." And just like that, the family finished up their morning grub as their Pa hitched the horses to the wagon. "They'll be preaching 2 services today, and I hear there's a fella from Dry Cove coming to speak. Your Ma and I will be back before supper tonight." As the mountain man and his wife prepared to set out down the old roadbed that was barely more than an animal trail towards the small church on the other side of Thomas Gap, the father looked back at young Conrad. "All right, son, I'm counting on you to catch us some fish for supper tonight with that bow. Now don't let me down." "Yes, sir, Pa," the young Conrad replied. "I aim to catch us a whole mess of them. You'll see." No sooner than the wagon turned the bend and was out of sight, Conrad grabbed his new bow, and he turned to leave when his little sister said, "Ma said you got to take us with you." "I ain't taking you young'uns with me. You'll scare all the fish off." "No, we won't, and I'm telling Mama if you just leave us." Conrad paused for just a moment and reluctantly agreed. "All right, but y'all are going to have to swim on the lower end of the creek. I'm going to practice with my bow up at that deep pool where we saw that fat fish the last time we were there." All of the younger siblings smiled and nodded their heads in agreement, and the barefooted troop set out for a day of fun at the creek that ran about a quarter mile down below their homestead. All the locals in Cabarrus County, North Carolina, called this watering hole Little Meadow Creek. It meandered through the hills and the hollers before eventually pouring into the Rocky River. During the summers, it would mostly dry up as the water slowed to a trickle during dry weather. Scattered up and down the creek were large, deep pools where some of the biggest fish hid. And as the morning went on, the younger kids were having a big old time, splashing and playing in the water, while 100 yards away, 12-year-old Conrad stalked up and down the banks of the deep section, focused intently on his new bow and arrow. Dozens of times he shot some darters and shiners, but they were too small to keep. Suddenly, Little John called out from the opposite bank, "Conrad, look at that trout hiding. Ain't he a whopper?" This was the moment that Conrad had been waiting for. His heart was pounding and his adrenaline spiked. "Pa will be proud of me when he sees this fish," he thought to himself. He slowly and methodically positioned himself to the best vantage point to get a good shot. "Hurry, Conrad! Don't let him get away!" his younger brother yelled. By now, all the other children had heard the commotion and they came running to see the fish. "Quiet, quiet! Stop moving!" The eldest son motioned with his hands, careful not to spook the trophy fish. The fish was a brown trout, a monster at nearly 3 feet long. "He must weigh at least 15 pounds, the mountain boy thought to himself. The fish began to slowly move. Conrad knew he had to get a shot off now. He never took his eye off the fish, and he carefully drew his weapon. "Shoot it, shoot it!" the eager siblings said with anticipation. None of them could contain their excitement, and they were literally jumping up and down. It was all so distracting to Conrad, but he remained focused as best he could on the fish that was soon to be tonight's supper. He took a breath in, just like his pa had taught him, and he slowly and calmly exhaled as his fingers released the arrow. The shot was straight and true, a thing of beauty as it flew through the air. But the fish must have been at least 5 feet deep in the water, and as soon as the arrow broke the water's surface, the wily old trout darted, just as the arrow sailed right over the top of his back. Conrad had missed. He stood silent, devastated really. There would be no fish for supper tonight. Defeated, the 12-year-old boy climbed down and waded into the water to retrieve his arrow, and as he was under the water, the sunlight was reflecting off the rocky creek bed. Something caught his eye. It was flashy, and it seemed to reflect the sunlight. He had never seen a rock like this. After he collected his arrow, he took a second dive to get a closer look at the shiny rock. It was yellow, and when he tried to pick it up, it was heavier than a normal rock. What was this thing? He managed to drag it out of the water, where all the children gathered around looking at it. It was the strangest rock any of them had ever seen. "I'm going to take it home. Pa'll know what it is," the oldest sibling replied, as the day at the creek came to an end. That evening, the boy showed the rock to his father. The rugged mountain man was puzzled. He had never seen anything like it. It was about the size of a grown man's shoe and was a strange yellow. "I think it's some kind of metal, but I'm not sure. I'll take it down to Johnson's Bend in the morning and see what old man Anderson knows about it." The next morning, just as John Reed had predicted, it was raining, but he remained curious about the yellow, heavy object that his boy had found in the creek. So he paid a visit to the local silversmith. Yet he too was baffled by it. The old man placed the mysterious item on his scales. "It's most certainly metal, and it weighs over 17 pounds. But I hate to tell you, it ain't worth nothing. Just something pretty to look at." Satisfied with the expert opinion of the silversmith, John Reed took the yellow piece of metal back home. When he walked onto the porch of the crude cabin out of the rain, he took one last look at the yellow object and placed it in front of the creaking cabin door that would always swing open. Just like that, it became a doorstop to hold the creaking door open, where it would remain for the next 3 years. During that time, life continued on the Reed homestead, much as it always had. The children grew older, the crops were tended on the 30-acre farm, and Sundays were spent together at the church. The yellow metal doorstop became a familiar sight, taken for granted by the Reed family as an oddity they had found in the creek. Little did they know, but this unassuming object would soon change their lives forever. In October of 1802, John Reed loaded up his corn harvest in his wagon, preparing to take it down to the market. The cool winds were blowing steady through the forest, a sure sign that fall was on its way. Due to the winds, John was having trouble holding his tarp on top of his payload, so he grabbed the yellow doorstop and placed it on top of the tarp to hold it down for the 2-day journey to the big town of Fayetteville. This was a yearly pilgrimage for Mr. Reed, and he hoped to get as much money as possible. While he was there, he hoped to do some trading to try to get his wife a new dress and his children their first pair of shoes, along with other needed staples. On his 3rd day in town, he had sold the last of his crop. The entire year's worth of work had netted him $13.25. After he bought supplies for the coming year, there wasn't any money left for new clothes or shoes for the youngins. "I guess Sally will have to wear that old dress another year," he thought to himself. And as he was loading his seed bags for next year's planting season on the back of his wagon, a man in a business suit happened to walk past the farmer's wagon when he noticed a 17-pound yellow chunk of metal holding the tarp down. "Excuse me, sir, is this your wagon?" the stranger inquired. "Yes, it is," the farmer replied. "Where did you get such a fantastic yellow nugget? I've never seen anything like it," the stranger inquired. "It's peculiar, isn't it? My boy found it in a creek a few years ago, and we just been using it as a doorstop. It ain't worth nothing." "On the contrary, my dear sir, I believe it's the most fantastic thing I've ever seen, and it's very valuable. I'd like to buy it from you now. Name your price. Whatever it is, I'll pay it," the well-dressed stranger replied. The mountain man kept a straight face that outwardly showed no evidence of the elation he felt inside. "Name my price? Anything I want. John thought to himself. He took a long look at the businessman. A fella like that, oh, he's bound to be able to pay a hefty price. Suddenly, John spoke up. Well, something as pretty as this is, it's bound to be worth a fortune, and I can't let it go for just anything. Yes, sir, I agree 100%. Just name your price, and I'll gladly pay it, the stranger said. Well, I feel like it's worth a full week's pay. $3.50, and I won't let it go for a penny less, the farmer shot back. The stranger looked puzzled for a moment, and then he hastily reached for his wallet, where he promptly purchased the Doorstop for $3.50. As the stranger hurried down the sidewalk with his new purchase, John thought to himself, the Lord sure does work in mysterious ways. Looks like I'll be able to get those shoes and that dress after all. John ended up staying another day in town before he headed back to Cabarrus County. Sally burst into tears when she saw the new dress, and for the first time, all the children had a new pair of shoes. Life had never been so good for the Reed family. A few weeks later, John was down at Watkins' mill to get some corn ground into flour. As soon as he stepped in, he could tell there was a buzz of excitement, and the sound of wagging tongues filled the air. What's going on? John asked. Pete Watkins, the owner of the mill, spoke up. Haven't you heard the news? What news? Well, they just discovered gold for the first time in America. And one of the biggest nuggets to ever be found in the world was found right here in Cabarrus County. A 17-pound gold nugget just sold for $3,600 at auction. Now, I need to pause here for a moment. You see, back in 1802, nobody knew there was any gold in America because it had never been found. And $3,600? In today's money, that's nearly $500,000. John Reed had just sold one of the largest gold nuggets ever discovered for $3.50 to a stranger who was actually a jeweler. John quickly saddled his horse and rode back to Fayetteville. Where he confronted the jeweler for ripping him off. The businessman countered that he told him to name any price and he would pay it. However, John wasn't leaving without more money. And after the mountain man pointed his hog-killing rifle in the jeweler's face, the businessman came around to understanding a mountain man's way of thinking. So he took $1,000 out of his safe and paid John Reed. John quickly returned home. The next morning at sunrise, his son Conrad led him to the exact spot where he had found the golden nugget. As the sun rose from the east, the sun rays trickled through the forest and danced on the water of the stream. There before Mr. Reed, he could see gold reflected in the sunlight as far as his eye could see. The two of them both filled their hands with as much as they could carry, and they ran home to tell their family. Their farm was literally America's first gold mine. John used the $1,000 to purchase mining equipment, and for the next 50 years, Reed's gold mine produced so much gold that the President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, set up the Treasury Department headquarters in North Carolina, where the gold was printed into coins. Not only did the Reed family become wealthy, for the first time in history, America had its own gold supply, and it moved further away from the dependence on European countries. Many more spectacular finds were made at this mine, including a 28-pound gold nugget, which at the time was the third largest nugget ever found in the world. Gold was the second leading export of North Carolina for decades, only behind farming. Folks flocked to the Appalachian Mountains from all over the world during the gold rush. Ironically, today, most folks believe that gold was first discovered in California, but the fact is, America's first gold rush took place in North Carolina, a full half-century before gold was ever thought of in California. And to think, it all started with a 12-year-old boy who wanted to skip Sunday school and practice shooting his new bow and arrow and a mysterious doorstop.